Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across this great world of ours. I'm going to continue this argument about, or discussion, I should say, concerning Native American and the westward expansion of white settlement as it conveys to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or what became known as many of the tribes as they started to be forced out of their native lands east of the Mississippi, such as, let's say, the five civilized tribes. For example, the Cherokee, Choctaw, for instance, the five civilized tribe, were forced out of southeast United States and forced across into Oklahoma, and part of this became known as the Trail of Tears. Also, the Indian Removal Act of the 1830s, namely, this occurred under Andrew Jackson. Excuse me, there. Occurred under Andrew Jackson, and with this this Indian Removal Act. And remember, the Cherokee took this argument all the way to the Supreme Court, won the case under Chief Justice Marshall, but it was Jackson that defied the Supreme Court and still forced a lot of the Cherokee and the other civilized tribes who were trying to accommodate and to adjust to what was known as the white man's ways during this time. And actually, some of these landowners, especially the Cherokee, would also own slaves. And this occurred just because the fact of the matter was that they wanted to assimilate the white man's ways, but it was Andrew Jackson and his forced removal west of the Mississippi. But the intent here is the Indian Removal Act, and then we had the Dawes Act, we had issues under Ulysses S. Grant that further would impede Native Americans and force them more onto reservations. And remember, part of this argument and my contentions, there's a book called The Destruction of the Bison. And this occurred where the bison were removed because they became a food source for a lot of the Native American tribes, as well as clothing at the time. And so the issue becomes, let's remove the food source so that the Native Americans would cater to the white culture. In essence, what it did is it caused more anxiety and more hatred to the white American culture. But the point I wanted to make here, for some of the 19th century that occurred during this, how the BIA, or Bureau of Indian Affairs, came about is, remember, a lot of and maybe some of you don't remember this, but a lot of the Native Americans were part of the War Department, or the Department would be the ones in charge of the Native Americans. And it was after a period of time that when the Interior Department was formed, that the Native Americans became part of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, came under the guidance of the Interior Department. And this is where it exists today. And my contention is, even back then, even when it was under the War Department, that was not where it should have been in the first place. And my contention as well now is even that the Interior Department is under the BIA is under the Interior Department, The case in point is that the system is obsolete and they need to become more autonomous and more to the tribes that exist rather than be kowtowed or dictated by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So, in essence, what becomes out of this period of time is the Bureau of Indian Affairs becomes part of the Interior Department, and the Interior Department dictates what happens to Native Americans on the reservation. And part of what comes out of this too, is remember we in the 1930s under FDR, we have the Harold Ickes tries to reform some of the Interior Department as well as the Department of Agriculture, but Harold Ickes, along with Roosevelt, gets resistance from a lot of Western congressmen and Western senators about this issue of reforming the Interior Department, because part of this becomes the fact that it's an issue of money and power, and I still believe that becomes an issue, and not necessarily had the best interest of Native Americans at this point in the 1930s. And like I said, this is quite evident in the 1830s with the Indian Removal Acts as well as the Dawes Act of 1887, and consequently other acts that occurred at this time following the Congress concerning or as Ulysses S. Grant called, the Native American issue or a Native American problem. And all this came ahead in Wounded Knee in the 1890s, and consequently this really forced many of the Native Americans forced on reservations, and for the most part they lost their autonomy because of this. And then, like I said, we have the issue of the BIA, and there's, like I said, I've said this before in my other videos, that the BIA, the members, not necessarily all leaders of tribes, but a lot of Native Americans and indigenous people have a mistrust for the government, and also they have, as part of that government is the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and with this mistrust, they don't cater to the BIA, but they try to help Native Americans. And I think, like I've said this previous, that this doesn't really help the system at all. I think it causes more problems. I believe that we have 12 regional offices. The main office is located in Washington, D.C. There's this disconnect, in my opinion, between the main office, because it's on Washington, D.C., it's on the East Coast, and not necessarily represents the best interest of all Native American tribes. And additionally, with the majority of the Native tribes existing west of the Mississippi. Not saying that there are tribes that are east of the Mississippi, but a majority of those tribes exist west of the Mississippi. And a lot of these tribes are in areas that are very isolated. And there's some issues about that, and I'll discuss that in a further video, because this isolationism of these tribes causes issues where there's no jobs, education or dropout rate in high school are high, drug abuse is high, mental abuse is high, and all these social issues are higher compared to the national norm compared to other classifications of ethnicity in the United States. And this also occurred during the COVID, where Native Americans suffered more of the death rate than compared to other ethnicities that existed in the United States. So, and the issue that the Biden administration appointing a Navajo person is part of changes. Really, the changes haven't occurred, and it's my contention that what we've done in the last 3 to 4 years, or even the last 30 years, is creating more bureaucracy and not really getting to the issue of helping normal tribes or tribes on the reservations. And I've dealt with tribes before in the past, and really, I think the leadership on the tribes knows and cares about issues that are on the tribes, and that needs to be addressed, and not necessarily those addressed at the Washington D.C. or the regional office. And if we took these regional offices and downsized them to maybe 4 instead of having 12, and actually closing the Washington D.C.'s office, there might be that additional revenue that could be taken and used for tribes. And remember, I wrote a book on diminishing casino return because post-COVID, with online gambling, with the death of boomers, death of Gen X, there's going to be the limit of funds for online gambling will be more higher than actually seeing the casinos. And yet, a few months ago, I read an article where Biden administration wants to open more casinos. I believe right now the casinos are saturated to the point where even private casinos are to the point where they're not making the money that they could be making, and that it's at a saturation level. So here again, I think these are issues that are not being addressed by the BIA, but are being what I call, hate to use the word, whitewashed. And the issue becomes, are we helping the tribes, or are we hindering the tribes for their development, or creating more autonomy? And my goal is always to say we need to create more autonomy with the leaders within the tribes, and not dictate to what's available with the BIA. Anyway, these are some foods for thoughts. Please like and subscribe. And if you're interested more, I do have some books available. They're on Amazon. Just wrote a book called Water Quality on the Reservation. And I also have that one on casinos and diminishing returns. Also have other books, Environment and Change. I've got quite a few books. They're under the titles B. Thomas Miller and Boyd Thomas Miller. Anyway, I will talk to you soon. And folks, have a great day. Talk to you real soon.